I'm Marshall Shannon with Ministry Design Concepts. Today we have as our guest Alan Wilds with Generis, and today he's going to give us step 5 of the Generosity Game Plan in action. So Alan, we're so glad to have you with us. Take it away.
Thanks, Marshall. It's good to finish up this series. We've been talking about all the different components of a solid generosity game plan for a church, and today is the 5th, and it's really the most fun, in my opinion, of all of them, because we're going to talk about celebrating in worship. But before we dive into that, just kind of a quick review. I'm convinced after 12 years of working in this ministry, this particular part of the ministry, that every church needs a generosity game plan. Most people who know me know that my former life, I was a college and high school baseball coach and still coach my son's 12-year-old team. And anyway, I'm a coach at heart, and I just talk in terms of game plans and strategies. And so I think every church needs a generosity game plan. And so that's what this is. This is a 5th part of 5 steps that I think are 5 components that I think every church needs to have as a generosity game plan. And what I've found is that most churches, unfortunately, do not have an intentional strategy for stewardship and for generosity. And while they have strategies and intentional strategies for every other major component of their church, for their children, for their youth, for their worship, for their music, for their missions, outreach, evangelism, all of those things which are vital components of most any church, they have intentional strategies, and oftentimes even have strategies that are written down. But for some reason, we don't have very intentional strategies for stewardship and for generosity and giving. And Marshall, you remember from your days of being a senior pastor, I mean, you spend at least half of your time dealing with personnel and money, right?
Yes.
But yet, most churches don't have an intentional strategy for how to be as good stewards as they can of the dollars as well. Well, actually, most churches probably do have a good strategy for being good stewards. That's their budget and their financing, their finance teams. But we don't have a good strategy for trying to generate the revenues that we need in order to do the mission and ministry that we want to do. A common misconception among church leaders is that 2000 giving levels are still at 2009 giving levels. Now, we all know what happened in 2008 and the fall of 8, and the recession began. Some people are classifying it as a depression, and we're slowly but surely climbing out of that regardless of all the political stuff that's going on. But we're still climbing out of that. And there's no doubt about it that giving dropped in 2009 from its all-time highs in 2007 and 8. Yes, no doubt about it. Giving took a hit in 2009, mainly out of fear. People were afraid. They began to save money and store money away, and charitable giving certainly dropped. There is no doubt about it. However, 2012 giving shows that giving has rebounded in a significant way. We are not at the 07 and 08 levels, but we are definitely higher than 09, 10, and 11. So giving is there. Again, the major difference that I'm seeing now, though, is that people are more shrewd in their giving and their investments, and I view giving to the church, as giving back to God through your local church, as an investment into the kingdom, and people are being more shrewd with their giving. Which leads me to this statement that you've seen me say and heard me say many times, Marshall. People do not have a giving problem, even in 2012, but many have a giving to your church problem. And we want to talk a little bit more about why that is. So we need a plan. How are we going to fix that? And we need a plan. We need a strategy. So I've already talked about 4 focal points of a game plan. We talked about vision, communication, the financial side, the reporting side of it, discipleship, learning what the Bible has to say, and then today we're going to talk about worship and celebration. And that's, to me, again, a very, very fun thing to do, but something that we just don't think about, and quite candidly, I think most leaders are afraid to do it in fear of possibly coming across braggadocious or self-serving. So I want to talk through that a little bit. The number 52, I think most of us, it's a kind of an odd number, but in our world, it makes, we all know that there's 52 weeks in a year, and that's the significance of the numbers, that there's 52 weeks in a year, And that's the amount of times that we get to see 70% of our people as a captive audience Sunday morning. We get to see at least 75% of the active people in our church once a week, and they come to us voluntarily, and they come in and sit and are willing to listen to what we have to tell them. And that is a significant difference than what most other nonprofits have. Most other nonprofits, they're going to spend thousands of dollars to see 70% of their donors in person one time a year, and most of the time they don't get anywhere near 70% of their donors one time a year. They try to get a lot of people there for an event, but it's very, very difficult for them to be able to get that kind of people, because oftentimes their people are scattered. The people who are their donors or their investors are scattered all over the country, and they just can't get there to an event. So it's very, very different in the nonprofit world, but they still see the value of spending a lot of money just so they can get in front of their people at a minimum of one time a year. And why do they do that? Well, they do that to tell their organization's story. They want to tell the people in person what their organization is doing, but more specifically, what their organization is doing to help change people's lives. That's why they want to get people, they want to get in front of people, because people like stories. They want to hear stories. We can relate to stories. We can see life change through the stories, not general stories, but specific stories about individuals' lives who are being affected or changed positively by the people of that organization. And people want to give to that. I want to give to that. Marshall, you want to give to that. And all people want to give dollars to organizations that they can see and know and trust that are facilitating life change in a positive way. That's what we want to do. So my question to anybody listening is your church telling its story? Every church has a story. Every church, hopefully every church is doing good things. I think they are. Every church I've ever worked is doing good things. Some do more good things than others, but they're all doing good things. They all have a vision. They all have a something that they're trying to do that is unique to them, that is changing people's lives. And so my question is, are you telling that story? People don't know if you don't tell it. Are you utilizing the worship service to tell your story? I mean, in this day and age, Marshall, with video and web and email and Twitter and Facebook and all these kinds of things that we can use, still the church's most significant advantage is the Sunday morning or Saturday evening or Sunday evening worship service. Again, going back to my original comments, you have a captive audience, and they come to you. You don't even have to go get them. They just come to you and they sit there, and you've got a chance to tell your story. In my opinion, the local church has the best story of all nonprofits to tell, and that's the story of Jesus Christ. I mean, there's a lot of parachurch organizations that are certainly faith-based and do the work of the kingdom. There's no doubt about it, and many of them are designed to spread the gospel, just like the church is. But there's also a lot of nonprofits out there that their number one goal is not necessarily to spread the gospel. It's to do a specific thing that's going to help people. And whereas the church, we've got the good news. I mean, and anybody can certainly share the good news from any organization or on their own as an individual, but the church has the good news, and we've got the best story to tell. And the song, my daughter Marshall, the other day in church, she came home and I asked her, I said, what was the lesson today? And she said, we were talking about letting our light shine. And they sang, of course, we all know what they sang. What did they sing, Marshall?
Let this little light shine. Yeah.
Yeah, this little light of mine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. And unfortunately, are we going to put it under a what is it?
Bushel?
A bushel, yeah.
Yes.
No, I'm going to let it shine. But yet it seems like we're putting it under a bushel, and we're not telling the story like we should. And so if your people don't know your story, the people of your church don't know your story, then how can we expect them to tell your church's story to their neighbor? The people need to know what's going on. They need to know what their church. They're proud of their church. They want to know what's happening. But if we don't tell them, how are they going to find out? Well, we send it in the newsletter. Really? How many people read the newsletter? If you think that 50% of your people are reading your church newsletter, you are sadly mistaken. If you think people read the bulletin on Sunday mornings, you are sadly mistaken. You need to tell them in worship, orally, through video and presentation. You need to tell them. So when, where, and how should you tell it? When. Let's talk about when. You can probably get a pretty good idea. Well, as often as possible. I'm not just saying only use worship, but that is our primary vehicle. We're going to tell it as often as we can. There are celebration moments all over the place, every day in every church. I work in churches where, I go in on a Tuesday. I was at a church just yesterday, and I went in there, and there was not an empty room in the place. I mean, from about 1 o'clock to about 3 o'clock, there's not much going on. But from 3 o'clock on, I mean, they've got all kinds of civic organizations in there, scouts, and all kinds of different things going on. Celebrate Recovery, and I mean, Financial Peace University, and all these things that they're doing. And they're not just for their people, but they're for their people as well as the community. And there's so many life change moments happening right there, but we're not training our people to look for those moments and then taking an opportunity to celebrate those. But we've got to celebrate it as often as possible. And where are we going to do it? Well, in every possible location. Use all of your media channels. Use all of the things that you have. Email. Use that newsletter. I'm not saying don't put it in the newsletter, but we can't depend on the newsletter to be the primary communication vehicle. I'm not saying don't put them in the bulletin, but we can't depend on the bulletin to be our primary form of communication. It's all together forms a significant communication plan. So how do we do it? Well, again, in as many humanly and technologically ways as possible. We have all kinds of communication tools at our fingertips, and we've got to take advantage of them. Video, I mean, you can shoot a video on your phone now and upload it to YouTube from your phone and connect it to Facebook. I mean, it's just crazy what you can do. And people are doing it all over the place, and so why is the church not doing that? Why are we not doing those things? Why are we not training our staff members to do those things? Why are we not training our staff members to look for those moments at events that they're a part of, mission trips and parties and Sunday school and small groups? And we just need to look for those stories and listen for those stories of life change that are being facilitated because of the church, the people of our church, the staff of our church, events that the church is putting on, whatever it might be. We just got to look for ways to celebrate and celebrate the life change that's happening in our people's lives. Again, here's another baseball reference for you, Marshall. The biggest whiff when it comes to telling the story. What do you think that is? I'll just put you on the spot. What do you think the biggest whiff is?
Well, nothing comes to mind.
Nice answer. The biggest whiff for me in my time in the church is before and after the offering time in worship. That's just, to me, what I have found is that the offering time is, in many ways, is almost just an afterthought. So my question, if you're listening, you're a church leader, you're a pastor, my question directly to you is your offering time in worship a highly valued and integral component of worship? Or is it just part of what you do because you got to raise money to be able to keep the lights on? And if it's the latter, then we got some talking to do. I'd love to chat with you and help walk you through that. Because that's just, it's not a ritual. It is an active part of worship. You cultivate what you celebrate. That's not original to me. Many of you probably heard it before. But if we want people to be generous, then we have to celebrate generosity. It's just like raising a child. Marshall, if you wanted your sons to be kind and courteous by opening doors for people, then you open doors for people, right?
That is correct.
If you wanted them to say sir and ma'am, then
you say sir and ma'am.
I mean, we emulate what people of influence in our lives do. If people of influence over us do positive things, then more than likely we are going to do positive things. If we want our people to be generous, then they need to see others being generous. They need to hear about others being generous. They need to hear stories. They need to know that their pastor is generous. You cultivate what you celebrate. So, question, how often do you connect life change that happens in your church to the financial generosity of your people?
I would say every chance you got.
That would be the right answer. But if I were asking a church leader, that in their church right now, obviously the answers would vary, but unfortunately the answer would be not very often, or some semblance of that answer of not very often. And of course my question would be why? And remember, you cultivate what you celebrate. So it's a mindset, it's a paradigm shift for so many people to begin to think like this. So here's a suggestion. Tell a story before the offering that illustrates the giving of the people, that the people is causing positive life change. Just the other day in my church, the church I attend does a lot of things really well. Do a lot of things with generosity really well. They celebrate baptism really, really well. Do it well. I mean, just it is first class video of the person being baptized, and I mean they've got oftentimes it's a family member or a person who has brought them to Christ in the baptismal pool there with them, baptizing, and they've got them all mic'd up, and so you can hear them talking, and they've got video cameras where you can see them on the screens. I mean, it's just really, really first class, really well done. But the thing that just continues to cause me to scratch my head a little bit, Marshall, is that we take the offering before the baptisms.
Yes.
I mean, it's right before the baptisms. It's almost like it's a transition to get the stage ready for the baptisms. And so I want to ask, and I probably am going to ask the leaders of my church, what about if we took the offering after baptism? And because it allows the person who's speaking from the stage that day, whatever pastor is speaking from the stage that day, it allows them to come back up and say, church, that's what we're all about. I mean, that right there is what we're all about. We are here to bring people to Jesus Christ. And we do that in so many different ways. There's so many different paths for a person to come to the conclusion that they want to publicly profess their faith for Jesus. There is no one way to get there. And so there's so many different paths, but it comes through staff, it comes through worship services, it comes through youth retreats. We had 30-something kids baptized last Sunday, 30-something teenagers baptized last Sunday.
Wow.
I mean, it comes in so many different ways, and so many of them are because of what's happening at our church. Well, the church doesn't exist, the physical part of the church there, the buildings and the programs and the services, they don't exist without money. They don't exist without staff members. Staff members don't exist without getting paid. Staff members don't get paid unless the people of the church give. But so many times we don't connect the dots for people. Many people think that the money just grows on a tree out in the back of the church somewhere. They don't understand that it's their giving that allowed that child or that man or that woman to have the opportunity to grow in their understanding and love for Christ, to get to a point where they're willing to publicly profess their faith and to be baptized. And why don't we think that way? And I think a lot of it is fear. We're afraid that people are going to think we're being manipulative. They're afraid that we're being, we're using them. We're using the baptism to raise money. Well, you're only doing that if your heart is not right. So if the person speaking from the stage, if it's a senior pastor or associate pastor or whatever, if their heart and in their mind they're saying, man, what a great opportunity to raise some money and get a great big offering right here. We're going to have the best offering of the year because I'm going to work this baptism. I'm going to work the crowd. I'm going to use this baptism thing to raise some money. If that's the state of the person's heart that's standing up there talking, then you're exactly right. You are manipulating people and using baptisms. But if you're helping people understand the connection between their giving and how their giving allows and facilitates this type of life change to happen, and thank you for being so generous, because one more person has just been accepted into the kingdom, or 2 more people, or 30 more people have been accepted, or whatever it might be, then the state of the heart is what God cares about. And if the state of the heart is right, then people are going to accuse you of all kinds of things anyway. But if your heart is right, you're going to sleep well that night, and God's going to be pleased with what you did. I didn't mean to go to preaching, Marshall, but one way to adjust the offering time, I challenge you. If you're listening to this, I challenge you. Within the next 4 Sundays, figure out one way to adjust the offering time to celebrate life change. It doesn't have to be baptisms. It doesn't have to be something that huge and that significant and that big. It could be, I know of a church that they sell Christmas trees. The men of the church sell Christmas trees, and all of the money goes towards 2 children's ministries in the local area of the church. And they pick 2 ministries every year, and they split the money, and they give that money to those 2 charities. Well, they bring the representatives from those 2 organizations in on it's usually like the 2nd or 3rd Sunday of January, after the money's, they've got the dust is settled from Christmas, and they invite those 2 representatives to come, and then they make a presentation of the money. They have the big checks, like they have, and they show them the big check, and oftentimes it's tens of, it's sometimes the total offering is about $25,000 to $30,000. So they're giving these organizations checks for $10,000, $15,000.
Wow.
Which that's real money. You can do some serious things with $10,000. And the first time that they told me about it, I said, well, did you make that announcement before the offering or after the offering? And they said, well, it came later in the service. I said, next time let's do it before the offering, because the majority of people who bought the Christmas trees go to that church, and it's an opportunity to show them that their generosity is making a difference. Now, mind you, that's not to the operating budget. Buying that Christmas tree doesn't help the operating budget, but it helps the kingdom, and its life change is being facilitated through their church. Their church is facilitating life change, and this is what we're about. This is why we exist. We exist to change lives and to better lives and to bring people to Christ. So I want to thank you as your pastor or one of your staff members for being so generous, supporting the men's ministry of our church, allowing those trees to be bought and allowing us to be able to give that money away to those children's lives. We are a generous church. You are a generous people. And I wanted to say thank you. I'm proud to be your pastor for being so generous and being able for us to be able to do things like this. So I thank you for that. And then take the offering. Some people say that's manipulative. I say it's being smart. So one way to publicly celebrate life change and connect it, and I challenge you to find out one way to publicly celebrate life change and connect it to the generosity of the congregation. I just gave you an example right there. Though that wasn't a specific life change, but that was a general life change. But then I made a suggestion to the men of this church. I suggested to them, instead of just talking to the people who come on the Christmas tree lot and just telling them about the ministry in general, why don't we get some stories and testimonies from the people, the kids who are being affected by these organizations, whose lives are being changed and bettered because of these organizations. Let's get some pictures. If these kids or these organizations are willing to let us get pictures, and let's put some stories, and let's put names to the faces, and help these people see that their lives are being changed. And you'd be amazed, Marshall, at how many people will spend $75 for a Christmas tree that they can go to Home Depot and buy for $25.
Yep.
Because they know the money is going directly to changing lives. And that's just an illustration of how we can do that. You cultivate what you celebrate. I'm being pretty obnoxious for that, but it's pretty true. So remember, people do not have a giving problem. They have a giving to your church problem. And 2012 numbers are showing that that's proving to be the case. Giving levels are up. and they're on the rise. But people are giving to less and less organizations, so we have to compete. Church has to compete for the charitable dollars. And one of the best ways we can do that is to celebrate and to show the people of our church how lives are being changed. Giving to God deepens our relationship with Him, and it draws us closer to Him. Giving, I've said this before, and I'll say it probably till the day that I stop doing what I'm doing, is that it's almost giving is the final hurdle or the final frontier of truly entering into an amazing, intimate relationship with God. We'll give Him control of everything else, but sometimes we just won't let go of our wallet. And when we finally do let go of the control of our wallet and give it all over to Him, the control, it's amazing at how life changes. So we have to show them how their giving impacts the kingdom. So we've got to do it. We've got to show it, whether it's live or in video or whatever it may be. We've got to show them. So Marshall, I could keep going and going and going, but I don't want to bore people. But it's celebrating it's fun. I mean, who doesn't like a good celebration, right? And why don't we do that in worship? So I challenge you, if you're listening today, I challenge you, figure out a way that you can celebrate the life change that your church is causing in the people of your church and your community. Marshall, thank you for letting me have this opportunity.
Well, thank you for investing yourself in myself and in our listeners. And folks, I trust that you'll take time to go back over this video after you've listened to it, add any comments you've got, punch submit, click submit at the bottom of your video. There you'll see a comment box, and we'll be able to have Alan address your comments or your questions. And I trust you'll take to heart these areas that Alan is hitting on, because they're powerful, they're productive, and they'll allow you to move your ministry forward. And as Alan said, who doesn't want to let others know what God is doing in and through their ministry? And you need to let your people know so it affects the way that they faithfully carry out their stewardship. Alan, thank you so much for your time, and I trust that you'll tune in for the next one as it comes down the line.